Dear friends, grace to you and peace from God our Creator and from our risen Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen. This past Sunday evening, after nearly 8 years of being seizure-free, I had a breakthrough seizure. Yeah, most of you know I have epilepsy. It's been under control with medication pretty well, but it was at a football banquet where we were celebrating the phenomenal season that the varsity football team had this year, winning the Delta League and getting to the second round of the playoffs after losing in a heartbreaking loss to Inderkum, a powerhouse in Sacramento. I helped coach the JV team, as you've heard me preach about, and JV was a little different, let's just say. It was a developing year for that group, and I was pleased to be the assistant to the assistant to the assistant, the glorified equipment manager. I did not get to see, unfortunately, my son Lucas win the award for most improved along with another kid on his team because of my being in an ambulance going to the ER. But so goes it. I seem to have an angel on my shoulder with my epilepsy, though. My wife, Neela, always seems to be near me, which is good and bad, I suppose. Epilepsy is scary. From my perspective, I feel kind of strange, and then I go unconscious and wake up a few minutes later with people trying to talk me through it. It's happened enough times to me now that I can kind of figure out what's going on as it's happening, like not right as it's happening, but kind of afterwards. And eventually you regain your consciousness within a few minutes. But other folks see something different. The gentleman, a friend of ours, was sitting across the table from us, and he texted me what he saw. He said, "You just froze. And then you started trembling like somebody was hitting you with high voltage electrical wires. And then they had to clear space and put me on the ground and called 911 and so forth." Of course, everyone wants to help, but some want to help a little too much. I guess we have that too. Honestly, if you ever see anyone having a seizure, whether it's me or someone else, just clear them space, help them get to the ground in a safe way, and let it pass. And then kind of talk them through it. That's kind of how it works. Most want to call 911, which is totally fine. And the EMT come and they ask questions like, "Can you tell me your name? Do you know what year it is? Do you know who the president is?" So forth. May or may not be a good thing to say. But having a seizure is not a pleasant experience, but it's also not the most painful thing you can imagine. Mostly it's just really embarrassing, especially if it happens in public places, and somewhat depressing as you constantly have to look over your shoulder wondering if or when the next one's coming. Although I have to say, it's good to be in a community of people that love you, care for you, and support you no matter what, and I feel that in this church community. And the overly officious person at the football banquet that wanted to help actually gave me a hug later in the week, which I appreciated. Glad to see you're okay, everything's okay. I'm actually blessed in that my seizures are pretty well controlled with medication. For others, it's a different story. They have these all the time, and that's unfortunate. Because of my medical history, I have a special relationship to our text from Isaiah, where he declares a vision of the coming day of the Lord. In it, among other things, people are healed, the blind see, the deaf hear, the lame walk, and the earth is healed and renewed. Dry places are made lush again, parched places alive. Those of a fearful heart, those are the ones that Isaiah is called to speak to, who will find strength and courage by his words. Another translation for those of a fearful heart is those whose hearts are racing. People's hearts race for all kinds of reasons. They may be afraid of having a seizure. They may have a more generalized anxiety disorder, which is actually quite common in the United States today. They may have just gotten an awful medical diagnosis or found that they heard they're losing a loved one. Of course, our hearts also race for good reasons. Just before a competition, or as we're about to open that letter from that college we really, really want to go to, or the person who's proposing marriage and waiting for a response. But Isaiah is speaking to those people who've grown weary from their worry, whose hearts are broken because of their pain and misery. That's something I think all of us can relate to in one way or another, whether it's epilepsy or some other challenge that you have in your life. I mean, life is difficult. We all have a cross to bear, some of us more than others. It is filled with peaks and valleys, challenges as well as joys. And how we face difficult times says as much about who we are as anything else. Isaiah's message is a word of hope for those in distress. And it's interesting in our gospel today that there's a link that Jesus makes with Isaiah's prophecy. John the Baptist sends word, he's in prison, he sends word to Jesus. Are you the one we're waiting for, or is there another? And Jesus responds by asking, what do you see and what do you hear? The deaf hear, the blind see, the lame walk. And then he says, this is interesting, blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me. And that's interesting, that folks could take offense at those who heal and care for and tend others. In other words, Jesus has ushered in that day of the Lord, the day of God's shalom for God's people, Israel. And it has taken the form of physical healing of those whose hearts are racing with the fear of the unknown. Our text from James is interesting as well. James often gets dismissed by Lutheran Christians because Luther didn't like him very much. He famously called it the Epistle of Straw. So I think we've kind of dunked it whole hog, which is unfortunate. Luther's accusation is that it has works righteousness in it. In other words, to be saved, you need to do something. But James really, what he points to is caring for the hungry, the poor, the vulnerable, those on the margins of society. If you have food and someone is near you that is hungry and you don't give them any food, that's a problem. Whether it's an issue of salvation or not, we must care for those in need, just as Jesus did. Went out to the lost, the last, and the least, to the most vulnerable, to help them. That's really James' point. And James does not have kind words for the rich and the powerful, who are oppressing the weak and the vulnerable. There's a sort of reckoning in the text that we see from Isaiah through James to Jesus about God's justice. In our text for today, however, James calls for patience on the part of the oppressed, even as they wait for the Lord. Just like a farmer has to wait for his or her crops to grow, so the oppressed must wait on God's justice. James does not have kind words for those taking advantage of others, which is why his words are a kind of reckoning for justice. The term reckoning is interesting. It seems really negative. It sounds like the title of a really bad movie, The Reckoning, right? But it all depends on your perspective. If you're the one at the bottom being oppressed, a reckoning and overturning of the tables of justice probably sounds pretty good. Like justice is finally yours. God's promise in the end is to set right what has gone wrong. But sometimes we just need to let go and trust that all shall be well. I do wonder also, and I thought about this with my own epilepsy not long before I had this most recent seizure. I didn't use this word, but there is a kind of reckoning with this. Someday I'll probably have a breakthrough seizure. I wonder when that will be. And here we go. But I wonder if reckoning could almost be a positive term, in the sense of a reckoning towards healing and wholeness. As one who has a physical ailment, it means something deeply personal, to look forward to a time when I don't have to worry about if or when the next seizure is coming. No, seizures, the ones that I have, because I'm actually on medication, are called breakthrough seizures. Kind of like breakthrough moments in our lives that shape who we are. In many ways, don't we define our lives around negative medical events or other problems we've had, just like in history, we define history by wars that occurred. And yet, although we have these challenges and struggles that seem to shape our lives, we cannot be reduced to them. You are more than whatever ailments or challenges or problems that you have. So don't let yourself be reduced to the negative. I would also say that not everything about physical ailments is bad. When you are sick or dying, you have an appreciation for life in a way that you don't when you're caught in the humdrum of everyday life. But those breakthrough moments make you long all the more so for a day when you don't have to suffer or worry or despair about your future. And I think that might be what Isaiah is talking about and what Jesus promises to God's people. It's what's behind his support of John the Baptist in his prophetic ministry, his harsh words. And it's what bathes all that he does as one who both announces and brings about God's reign. That day is a reckoning, but the reckoning is also a moment of hope for all. Amen.